All right. Hello, everybody. I am Mike here with my co-hosts, Price and Derek. And we are excited to launch our first episode of America's New Clothes, where, like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, we do not fear social shame. And we will be out there, hopefully giving some viewpoints that you guys yourselves are thinking about as you read the news and see some of what you're seeing the world react to out there on social media. We started this because myself and Price and Derek have been using each other as a not a shoulder to cry on, but people to curate other news ideas for and bounce some reactions and commentary off of. And we thought, why not make it a shareable piece of content? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I'm a software entrepreneur, developer. I just tried my hand in politics by running for a California congressional seat. And in that process, I learned a lot, and I was helped a lot by my campaign manager, Price here. Price, you want to tell our viewers something about yourself?
Sure. I'm a recent graduate of Boise State University. Go Broncos. And during my time at the university, I was the president of the Boise State College Republicans. I was involved in multiple campaigns, went on to become a political consultant. And yeah, that's how actually I met Mike through a mutual friend who sent us to a training center, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, as we kicked it off and started talking politics, and I decided to jump on board and run his campaign. And yeah, no, I mean, the world we live in right now is absolutely crazy. 2020 has been a hell of a year. And I think that through this show and just through the general media landscape in general, there's going to be a lot of people who are, one, having a first time actually jumping into the political world, and two, voicing their opinions online and in the streets, as we can see
No doubt.
just by looking out your window. But don't let me hog up everything. I want to introduce Derek. Derek, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I'm born and raised in the South, so come from the perspective of being in the South, but having lived for a couple years in Chicago and about 15 years in California and Santa Monica. I traveled the world, been over 40 countries, lived abroad on a couple of occasions. Just coming from a different perspective as well, being able to, having sat down with many people around the world that I've met in hostels, hotels, trains, everywhere. And have gained a very good perspective on, kind of the way the world thinks of America, rightly or wrongly. And so hopefully we can shed some light on kind of what the feeling is to some degree around the world, but also to give an interesting introspective as to, kind of the crowd and thinking of the American concept now with the shifting political climate on a, not really just a daily basis, but literally a minute by minute basis. So we're looking forward to bringing some hopefully some good content to you guys and making you think. I think that's our biggest thing, is to try to get into the minds and really start having people ask questions rather than just taking what they're being told.
And that's exactly right. I think the timbre of this is that so many more people, like Price said, are becoming more involved in the political process. We've never seen civil liberties taken away from so many people as the corona lockdowns kind of made people endure. And so either from the case of having more time on their hands to research the news, or truly trying to understand who makes these decisions for us and our planet, I think people are tuned in. And so we want to help curate some good ideas, some good content, and be a Sherpa, more or less.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, we don't want to be an ideological echo chamber. We want to engage people. We want to cross the aisle. We want to have interesting discussions with individuals from all walks of the political sphere, and hopefully engage them on the merits of their ideas. And engage in that kind of conversation, which I think, if you watch cable news or any other mainstream news organization, is unfortunately not happening at the moment.
Yeah. Right. No, it's tough to find. Well, I think first order of business is for us to kind of jump into this big question: is, are we going back to crazy coronavirus lockdowns? And so, without further ado, I kind of want to have Derek give us a look-see at what he's thinking the timbre of our public health crisis is going to be coming forward here.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back from when I entered the country, I was traveling abroad, so I came back on the 20th of March from South America. And obviously at that point, the lockdowns were just beginning. At first we were told, they're going to last maybe a couple of weeks. Let's flatten the curve, see if that gets under control. And everything was coming from everywhere, right? I mean, all the models that were coming out were, doom and gloom. And it was interesting to see how, people kind of handled that. And I think everybody was the benefit of the doubt at first of saying, all right, let's try this. We understand there's a pandemic. It's something, especially for us.
Oh yeah, we were obedient. We were very obedient, right?
Yeah. And most of us, quite honestly, don't really remember what H1N1 virus even was, right? I mean, it didn't seem to be a pandemic that rose to this level of delirium by any means. So, as we went along, and we were being told every day that go outside, and you're going to kill your mom, and it's just everything that was really put into the fear factor for us. But we obediently went along with it. We assumed that the government was telling us the truth, and again, at the end of the day, maybe they were, but looking back on it now from a common sense standpoint, there were just a lot of questions that a lot of people weren't asking. Now you look back at all the models that put all the governments on almost in competition with each other. Well, we can shut down better than you can. Right. And all those models, every single one of them has been considered wrong, right? Has been labeled and shown to be wrong. Now, again, I understand they've got to do predictive modeling, which, hedge funds do and everything else. But what it doesn't usually solve for is obviously the psychological behaviors of the consumer or the person that you're telling you've got to shut down and stay at home. And once we noticed that, once we had friends of ours that had friends or had loved ones or whatever that maybe went to the hospital, but it ended up coming back home in 2 days, or being told, not even kept at the hospital and told to go back home, it just didn't seem to be as bad as we were being told.
Right.
Obviously, some
worse.
Correct. Yeah. So some areas were hit worse, as we know, New York City, Italy, Spain. But what's being shown now is the states or the cities in particular that did not shut down, right, or had a very, very minimal shutdown. The death rate and hospitalization rate hasn't really been any different than the states that had a full lockdown and are still in lockdown. So, as we look at this now, what seems to be, if you read the news every day now in the last 3 or 4 days, is there seems to be an uptick in cases. And I don't know, it offers an interesting conversation and topic to discuss again, of saying, well, why are the cases increasing? Some epidemiologists and virologists were saying, a month and a half ago, look, we didn't kill the virus by keeping people at home. We just we just changed the dates on the deaths. So you can't, to them, they're like, you can't really kill a virus until you get enough people that have it to create some herd immunity. And of course, there are different numbers on the herd immunity. Is it 7%, as some have said, or is it as much as the 30 or 35% that's needed? But eventually, the virus will run its course. Will it become a normal annual thing like the flu? We don't know. Obviously, SARS did not turn out that way. MERS did not turn out that way. So, if you look at the New York Post, I'll share my screen. The New York Post and Vox actually did a couple articles in the last couple of days that have shown that the viruses, the hospitalizations, and the case rates ticking back up again. So, as you can see here, it says that Florida reported 8,533 new deadly illness this week, new cases, more than any 7-day period they had, I think, since March. Texas increased their hospitalizations by 6.3%. And so as you go through and you look at some of the states that have opened, and it does make you scratch your head going, all right, why them, right? Why do they increase? But then you look at like Georgia, where I am, and we haven't seen the infectious numbers that have increased. Now, some people have said, well, they weren't, they're not, Georgia's not really giving their true numbers, and they're hiding data and stuff like that. Look, I don't know. But we went to a restaurant, my family got together, last Sunday, I guess it was. Well, the restaurant was packed. They definitely had their every other booth and every other table. So they were doing their social distancing. But it was really good to see everybody just back out again. Some people were wearing masks as they came in or were, waiting, but others weren't. And it'll be a very good study on the psyche of people. Are people finally like, look, I'm just not going to live in fear anymore, and unless you force me to wear a mask, I'm not going to. It inhibits my freedoms or whatever. And will we see the uptick in I look at hospitalization more than cases, because if we're testing more, you're obviously going to have more positives. There's conflicting data as to whether or not if you've had a flu vaccine, does that mean you're going to be testing positive? There's also scientists I've looked at, seen videos from around the world that said that if you come in contact with coronavirus, but never had any symptoms, you're asymptomatic, or maybe you had some symptoms, but you didn't even know you had it, it wasn't strong enough to even go get yourself checked, that the antibodies last a lot longer. And so you can actually test positive even though you don't really have it. So it's just going to be a very interesting, approach and kind of step-by-step analysis here. Do we go back if these viruses are ticking up? Is it going to be used against us to say, hey, everybody, we got to shut down again?
Right.
And you just cripple the economy again. I mean, you damage people's lives.
Well, how much of the George Floyd and the BLM protests and the Antifa riots, how much has that influenced, do you think, people's response to this new social shaming again? People saying, hey, look, we're not falling for this again. Do you think that's a major factor as these cities come back to saying, hey, but we're opening up, but not so fast, guys. Keep
right. Mask. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the view for most people, or a lot of people that were first saying, hey, let me out of the house now. I'm ready to get back outside and get in the sun. I can't even get in the sun, right? I can't put my feet in my shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then to see the media, kind of condone the, non-social distancing practices and the non-face wearing practices to get out and protest, and then say, all right, well, that's why. So I can't go to my mom's funeral or my brother's funeral, but you can have 3 funerals for a guy that the media champions. And so I do think you'll see a lot of pushback there. Will we see a spike in cases that are directly attributable to the protest? I think we're going to be told that's the case. How much truth is to it? I don't know. I mean, I think it has to come from reputable sources, and everybody has their own reputable source, right? One person's CNN is one person's Fox News, one person's Vox is another person's Breitbart. So I think using common sense and applying that and seeing that, okay, we can all get outside and protest for a cause, but we can't go to church, right? We can't go to work. Right. We can go to and sit in line at Home Depot or Walmart, but we can't go vote. Right. I mean, these are the questions I think that common sense people just say, yeah, this just doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense.
They just need to move the polling locations to Home Depot.
Exactly. Right.
Or church.
Or out front of a burning building. So,
so it's interesting. Did any of you guys see the article from CNN talking about how over 1,000 healthcare professionals signed a letter saying don't shut down protests, using coronavirus concerns as an excuse?
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes to show the level of hypocrisy in the medical community. I mean, it's either a serious issue, because I recall that about a month and a half ago, in probably mid-April, when the coronavirus protests originally started to begin across the country, we had all these medical professionals saying these people need to stay at home. Having them out in the streets is going to spread the virus, and we are just not going to be able to recover. They're acting counterintuitive to the advice of the medical community. But now we're ending up in a situation where people in the medical community are saying, go out and protest, go out, make your voice heard. And so you can't choose both sides. You can either say stay home for everyone, or everyone can go out because it's not that big of a concern for most people.
Right.
And you have that. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and it has you ask that question, right? Of like, what's the end game? What's the objective here? Why can't people who are law-abiding people go about their, and not to say that the protesters weren't law-abiding. I'm not trying to draw a line in parallel there. I'm just saying, normal people who every day are sitting at home unemployed or want to get back to work, why can't they go about their lives and the media excoriates them for wanting to do that, right? Or the protest in Michigan where they wanted to get back out of work and get in the lockdowns. And like you said, that CNN article pointed to them and being like, oh, you're going to go out and cause a spike and you don't care about mom, your grandma at home. But then 2, they full-throated endorse everybody getting outside and protesting for some, cause of racism and all this other stuff on the BLM thing. And it's just, I think that's where people start to say, wait a minute, this just doesn't make any sense. And to your point, either we're all locked down for any excuse, there's no excuse that allows one person to go outside and not another,
Right.
or we all should be allowed to go outside.
Right.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And if you look at other articles, go ahead, Mike.
It does feel political. I mean, it feels political because it's kind of drawn along those value lines. But I think a lot of people are saying it. The question is whether or not the hypocrisy translates through to people to a place where they say, okay, I can read between the lines here, and it's not as dangerous as they're saying because they weren't censoring this group of people.
Right. I mean, I think at the end of the day, too, when you have people looking at, I was just discussing with a friend today who said that, my stats are wrong. But I've looked at the CDC stats, the WHO stats. So if they're wrong, then we've all been lied to, and we're all being lied to every day. But, there was a 99.98% survivability rate. There's a 0.0002% mortality rate for people under 50 that get it. So again, I understand, like when the Spanish flu, I understand you quarantine maybe the elderly, the people who are truly, going to be impacted by it and has a higher rate of infection. But let the healthier people, the younger people, the people under a certain age or whatever, schools. I mean, kids haven't been shown to get it. Why are you shutting down schools? I mean, again, I'm not by no means buying the government looking at all these stats with regards to kids, but seeing kids getting these things, getting the virus and having any major ill effects. And by major, I mean by even anything on the left of the decimal point. So, again, I think you have parents and people of kind of, I don't know, a sane mentality saying, again, this just isn't that enough. So what do we do? And it'll be the reaction to people if they do come back with a, hey, we're shutting down again. The reaction by people is almost, does that then spark a protest, or then the people who have been sitting peacefully and abiding by the law at home now say, all right, we're taking to the streets, and then watch the media be like, oh, you got to get back home, right? You got to shut yourself back inside. You're going to kill mom. So it's interesting. It'll be very interesting for sure.
And I think people will only take the security theater so long. Even in the state of California, where I live, we have the new guidelines that just came out that limit the number of people you can have in a backyard barbecue to 10. But then at the same time, limit the number of people you could have in a protest, which in most cases are tightly packed together, large groups of people coming from all areas of the community, to 1,000.
Right.
So where's the logic there? It doesn't make any sense.
That's a pretty wide range there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mean, but let's see. I think we are kind of running over on time for this segment. So, Mike, I know we wanted to talk about the idea of defunding the police, and you had some articles that you wanted to bring up about that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So there was an article in the Atlantic this morning, editorial. The feeling has been across people that that we are looking at remember during the 2016 election when we were not to take Trump literally, right? We on our side were saying, well, you can't take Trump literally. You have to kind of read between the lines. Everybody's heard the notion defund the police. I think if you type in DEF into your Google search, it will go ahead and autocomplete that for you. So obviously very politically risky to say, right? And we've heard a lot of people say it. So I'll go ahead and share this screen with you here. You're seeing the choice being made here to how important is it for us to actually defund the police? What does that mean? What this article is saying, obviously, is we don't exactly mean defund the police. What we mean is we're just going to be moving funds over to other social work, and it's a real reallocation of funds to get other parts of the government to work together on citizen safety. Right. Now, some of the stuff I can get behind. I mean, even in the backtracking, there's been some good ideas brought out, do all sorts of calls require a police officer to come into? Are there do we have a homelessness outreach team that is not trained in the exact same way as law enforcement? Are there certain kinds of disputes that we shouldn't be deploying the police for? So some of that stuff I think I can kind of get behind, but clearly you can kind of see from even the way that Joe Biden has said he's not signing on to this notion of defunding the police, that it can be pretty politically risky. And where I go to first is how can you defund the police? Who are the communities that's going to hurt most? Well, it's going to be hurting the communities that need the most policing. And a lot of those communities, in a lot of cases, I mean, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it's going to be a lot of communities of color, a lot of minority communities that will find themselves where law-abiding citizens could be most at risk from going ahead and defunding the police. So, and we're seeing some of this play out in terms of Seattle and the Chaz or the CHOP, whatever it's being called right now, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And I think what we need to see moving forward, LA saying they're going to pull $150 million out of the budget. The mayor in Minneapolis itself pushing back against the idea of outright defunding the police, and him basically getting the heckler's veto in his city council meetings. I think people understand fundamentally, and I know this is probably something we the three of us somewhat agree on. So it will probably be good going forward to get some other perspectives from other people in the community. But I think it's important for us to look at, where is the pain most going to be felt? Gated communities are not going to feel this kind of pain. Though they will to some degree, but you're mostly going to see the communities that need the most policing experiencing this. So that's my worry. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts? Have you seen any of? I know there's an experiment in Camden, New Jersey, that actually was somebody, where they did do this reallocation of funds, but I think the results of that are inconsequential, or they don't, they haven't been able to have a conclusive answer to say, hey, look, here's what happens. Crime spikes by 18% or what have you.
Well, being a conservative, I'm all in favor of limited government. And if we want to limit the control of the state to, we want to limit their monopoly on violence in the form of reducing the public defender and the police departments in these major cities, I think that has to be met with a two-pronged approach. As you decrease that level of police protection, you have to increase the individual rights of people to defend themselves. No. That comes with loosening gun restriction areas where it's difficult to obtain a firearm, implementing things like castle doctrines that allow people to defend their homes. All these things that in these communities already, they, in a lot of cases, are already banned from having and won't have access to. And if they don't have police to be there as the counterweight, then it's going to be anarchy and chaos. So if we want to have the conversation, let's have the conversation. But at the same time, if you completely discount the idea that you can't increase at the same time limiting police authority, then I think you're a bad faith actor and you don't want to have discussion.
Right. And we have to put a metric on people who are, a police doesn't respond to their incident because it seems like a neighborly dispute, and then it turns to physical.
Well, like for instance, I mean, one thing that comes to mind is Minneapolis is a property over or a life over property state. What that means is if someone is robbing your store, you as the store owner have no recourse in the moment. And if you do anything to protect your property, your livelihood, and your family members inside the store, you can be held legally responsible and be thrown in jail for protecting yourself and your business.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get rid of the police in that city, when those laws already exist, you're only opening the door to more people to take advantage of the system that they're going to try to implement.
Right. And we just watched the Bernard Goetz Netflix special, and it's very interesting. I felt like there was a true national moral struggle where you had Angel would go police the subways, and they people were saying, well, this guy defending himself was in his right. I felt like we were more equitable across the nation during that time. Obviously he served a sentence and whatnot, and he obviously in a number of ways he kind of discounted his initial claims later through his story. But at least I feel like at that time we were looking at our ability to defend our personal safety. Now we're in a position where, I mean, who's going to want to be a police officer? You make one false step, one false move, even if it doesn't result in the loss of a constituent's life, you're.
Well, I mean, we were talking about this today in San Francisco. In San Francisco, how they will no longer be taking calls. The police department will no longer be taking calls in areas where there has not been a crime, quote unquote, crime committed on the books. So that includes things like homelessness, domestic abuse, and a litany of other little crimes that are under the scope of the police department.
Right.
So what we're looking at right now, and it's the same thing in Minneapolis. So in the articles that you've read throughout the course of your examination, what kind of solutions and what kind of options have they put forward, and what kind of individuals be handling these cases versus the traditional policing methods that we have across the country currently?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a good segue to say, I was actually surprised to see Biden not jump on the progressive chain as he has train. And I thought it was bold and impressive that Biden came out and said, I'm not going with this whole defund the police movement.
Mm-hmm.
So how much do you think, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about what you know about the 2020 election. How much do you think that rather astute assessment, I would say, played into these latest poll figures?
Well, so I covered the 2016 and the lead up to the 2016 election. That was my freshman year of college. I started a college radio show called Crossing the Aisle. And we covered that election every week, 2 episodes a week, going into all the polls. Every poll said that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And the one thing that it taught me was take every poll you read with a grain of salt. Because if you actually understand how a lot of polls are conducted, it is usually a landline survey with an individual who is at home at about 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, who then wants to enter an uncaller ID number, who then has the time to sit around for 20 minutes and give you all of their information about how they're going to vote. So that is the very narrow individual who has the time to sit around and actually take a phone poll. Now, there are online polls, but those are deemed as being less accurate than officially conducted polls. Right. But I'm going to share my screen over here. We can go over.
Is it a push poll?
Oh, go ahead.
When they're selecting who they're calling, is it a push poll? I mean, are they?
Yeah. Well,
when their result.
Well, and that depends on which polling agency is conducting the poll. If you look at the Rasmussen, I mean, they do a really good job of making sure their polls are relatively accurate. If we go over to the general election lineup, Real Clear Politics is a political aggregate website, so it aggregates all the polls that have been conducted. In this case, it's between May 28th and June 9th. And as you can see, it has Biden up at around 8 points across the board. And obviously, we're months away from the actual election. A lot of things can happen. And a lot of people, like what happened in 2016, may not be being honest about who they're actually going to vote for. So as we dive in, it gets kind of interesting. If you dive into the actual state-to-state polls, you see that it narrows. So in Wisconsin, which was a battleground state that I believe Trump narrowly, he won it by, I believe Trump lost Wisconsin, but he was very, very narrow. If you guys can correct me on that, I'll correct myself at the end if I can find that out. Did he win Wisconsin? Hold on. He won Michigan and he won Ohio, and 2016 Wisconsin election results.
Because I thought that Hillary got it.
Yeah, Donald Trump won with 1% of the vote. Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Back to the polling though. So in Wisconsin, Biden has about a 4-point lead currently. If you go over to Florida, another battleground state, Biden is currently ahead 3 points. We go over to Michigan. Biden has a little bit larger lead at 7 points. Pennsylvania, which Trump narrowly won in 2016. Biden is ahead on the average at around 3 points, but a poll that was just conducted from May 29th through May 31st found that Trump was ahead 4 points. So like I said, take polls with a grain of salt because you never quite know how accurate they are as an actual depiction of the electorate. North Carolina, which has been in the news recently because the RNC has just moved their convention from North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, is currently Trump has a slight advantage. I mean, that's within the margin of error. You can't even tell if that's going to be a positive or negative at 0.3% in terms of the points.
Bryce, how many calls are these? Are these 5,000 respondents? Are these 500 respondents?
No. If you look at them, the largest poll conducted of registered voters between May 7th and May 9th is at 1,111 registered voters, and that had Trump up at 3 points.
And Price,
So,
and you want if I'm not mistaken, you typically want polls that show likely voters, not just registered voters, right? Just
correct.
Because, yeah,
likely voters are a much greater indicator of actual outturn or actually going to the polls versus registered voters. Because, for example, a place like California, all individuals who hold a driver's license are a registered voter.
right.
So, because they automatically register you to vote when you go to the DMV.
Right.
But one of the interesting things, though, too, and it's one of the things that I've kind of found across the board, is that there's a bit of a discrepancy in when you look at the actual approval ratings inside of the polls that have been conducted when it comes to Trump's approval rating. So if you look at the overall approval rating through all the polls that have been conducted, he's sitting at around 42% approve, 55% disapprove. Now, however, that may sound bad, but historically, most people have voted with their pocketbook. And if the economy is doing well, if there's confidence in the person heading the ship, in a lot of cases, they will vote to give them another term in office. So if you go over to the actual job approval rating on the economy, magically, lo and behold, his approval rating jumps from, it jumps to 50%.
Okay.
With a 45% approval
So that's
rating.
a factor.
Yeah, so that is a major factor when it comes to looking at how a president is doing.
Yeah.
Because if people approve of the handling of the economy, they're going to want more prosperity. And if they feel like the president is delivering prosperity, if things are getting back on track. I mean, we've already seen it in the stock market. In a lot of cases, the market is recovering from those initial coronavirus woes. We're going to continue to see that positive reopening of the economy. I think we're going to see that Trump is going to gain back a lot of the negative press that he's received in the recent weeks. But I don't know. That's kind of my takeaway as of now. Obviously, all these polls we're months away from the actual election. I think that you can really start getting an indication of how the electorate's going to vote around October. Probably maybe September, but October is where you really get a good picture of where the electorate is and if Trump's going to get a second term moving forward.
So do we think the convention, we think Biden is going to stay the course and be the nominee? And secondly, do you think that Trump and he will, if he is the nominee, will actually debate? Do you think they'll have?
Well, I would love to see a Trump Biden debate. I just hope Biden doesn't break out his chain and in the parking lot and try to go at it with Trump like he did back when he was a lifeguard back in the day. Give him corn pop. Beat him out in the park.
He'll challenge him. The winner of the debate will be who can do more push-ups.
But the one thing that also is interesting is I've kind of narrowed it down when I was doing my research for this segment. We have two historical precedents that have been set that kind of parallel the modern times we're in right now, and that is the 1992 election and the 1968 election. In the 1968 election, the country was going through a series of protests and riots across the country. There was a lot of civil disorder, and the American people, in a lot of cases, were being outshined and outspoken by the small minority of protesters who were in the street. Nixon was able to challenge that narrative with the idea of the silent majority, people who just want to go about their daily lives, people who want to have a business, take care of their family, and overall have peace and tranquility in the streets so they're able to conduct business. Channel that silent majority into a stunning electoral victory. I actually have it pulled up here in the Here's the 1968 election. As you can see, it was a pretty big sweep. But the one thing that is interesting is there was another example, the 1992 election. In the 1992 election, you had George H.W. Bush coming off of the popularity of the first Gulf War. It was a resounding success for the American military. It was the first major conflict since Vietnam, and so people had a lot of faith in the president until there was an event in 1992 when the Rodney King riots occurred. Well, largest loss of property in United States history in a single riot, billions of dollars of damage, thousands of buildings burned down, and people saw the president wavering in his response to the actual riots. They didn't think he acted fast enough, and overall, they viewed his ability to lead the country, also paired with a recession like what we're just going through right now. The Department of Labor just announced that the United States has entered a recession. That led to an incumbent Republican president losing his seat in one of the only cases in modern American history where a president who had the incumbency advantage losing that position. Now, the other major thing that I didn't notice until recently when I was looking at these things or at these articles was that there was a major third-party candidate involved as well.
That's right.
In 1968, you had George Wallace, the segregationist governor from Alabama, who was able to win 46 electoral votes. He carried 5 states in the South. It was a huge upset for the traditionally democratically voting South at the time. So they saw it as kind of a breaking of the Southern Democratic wall. Mm-hmm. In 1992, you had Ross Perot, who ran as an independent and who received 19 million votes, 18% of the total vote count. And a lot of people view that as a bit of an upset because those votes, in a lot of cases, people have guessed or surmised would have gone to President Bush, leading him to electoral victory moving into November. Right. So currently, if I was a betting man, I would bet on Trump winning in November because he has the incumbency advantage and because things are starting to pick back up. But at the end of the day, you can never be 100% sure. And anyone who tells you they are 100% sure is lying.
Yep.
Right. And I think going back to 2016, a friend of mine that's well ingrained in the GOP, remember he messaged me probably in May. It was either right before the Republican convention or maybe it was during it, but it was close to the convention. Remember, he texted me and said, "Whatever you hear in the poll, you're seeing in the polls and the media, don't buy any of it." He said, "My friends in the Democrat Party are freaking out because all their internal polling had Trump leading, not necessarily winning at the time, but was leading, and they were freaking out on how to combat it." And I think, and I was confident going off of that. I felt confident anyway, but then that kind of gave me the extra nose. All right, yeah, this is gonna happen. And I told friends of mine at a wedding out in June out in California, when they were asking me what's going to happen, look, I think he's going to win in a landslide. I think it's going to be close. Now, he didn't win in a landslide from a definition standpoint of it, but given the monumental forces he was up against,
given the flip Rust Belt, I think you could make the case it was a monumental victory.
Yeah, definitely monumental. When the New York Times had an 85.6% chance, an hour before the polls closed, that Hillary was going to win, and then she gets obviously beaten. But I think again, going on these polls, your point, and maybe what's not being said is that this was the case in 2015 and 16 when polls were being done. People do not want to say that they're voting for Trump because they're going to be labeled every demeaning on the so just go through that, and whether you're black, Asian, white, it doesn't matter. And so what I try to do is look at Twitter, look at Instagram, look at Facebook, and see what people are posting, and then read comments. And that's where I gauge how the public is really feeling on A or candidate B. Nobody's enthused, at least from what I can read, of Biden. Yes, they'll Biden 2020, blue wave, whatever, but you don't get a sense in how they're responding to people, whether it be a pro-Biden tweet that comes out and then their response to that, or if it's a pro-Trump tweet and then their antithesis to it, right? Their hate of it. You just don't get the enthusiasm to some degree. What I think you're seeing, the primary, for example, here in Georgia, and I have to go back and look, so my numbers may be wrong, but Trump got 140,000 more votes than Biden and Bernie Sanders combined. So if there was still that much enthusiasm, right, for Trump, then you got to think, in most all the primaries, he was winning more than the top candidate for Democrats. Now I know you can pull, you got 3 people or 4 people running, that can pull from that, but he's beating them all. I mean, pretty handily. And so from what I'm hearing too inside the Democrat Party right now is that's what having them scratch their head saying, do we have the right candidate? Why people go out and vote for Trump in a primary when they know he's going to be the candidate, and yet they're going out in droves. Yeah. They're going out almost as emphatically as they were in 2016. I think that gives the Democrats worry.
Yeah. So your take on Biden still being the candidate post convention? Strong.
I know what their rules are, and so I know that they're desperate. Because then they can make a change afterwards, but they can't do it in between, because then it has to go to Bernie Sanders, and as we all know, they've screwed him twice in two election cycles, so they don't want him. So that tells you something.
Well, back to my point, we could see a repeat in history. Sanders did decide to run as an independent and channel his base. I personally, like I said, it's a long shot. It's going to happen, probably not. But if he did decide to make that case, if Biden was the nominee and they viewed Biden as just this weak candidate who doesn't have the staying power to get over the line, anything's possible. Honestly, once you get to the convention, the delegates arrive. A lot of things can happen.
Right.
I would personally put my money on him making it through the convention, and even if he does make it through, I think a lot of people view him as a sacrificial lamb moving forward into 2024. Saying, let's just get him out of the way. Let's give this time. If he makes it, great. If not, then okay. We didn't really get the best and brightest on this 2020 election.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I think that's
a lot of candidates to go through to get to this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why his pick for VP is going to be looked at as this is going to be your president, right? I was hearing some interesting theory the other day. One saying they're going to wait 3 to 9 months, claim he's got some type of disability, say mental handicap, just a handicap relative to his being able to continue on as president. Then he backs away and hands over the reins to his VP. So now you're looking at Kamala Harris. I think they're actually now talking about Keisha Bottoms here in Atlanta, the mayor. Now, if we set aside that when she was corrupt mayors in Atlanta history, which is saying a lot, right? The Republicans are probably just teed up ready to go for that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well,
they're going to make their push.
Given recent events in Atlanta over the past day or two, I don't heard the pick, especially with what they're going to be looking for with a candidate, as for the VP candidate. I think that she might have chances. I know Kamala Harris is in the running. People have been saying that Kamala Harris is the candidate that people have been looking for that. Either if you look at her track record when she was Attorney General in California, one of the primary things she did was prosecute single black moms under the truancy laws that were in place and threw them in jail.
Right.
So that doesn't really work well with the African American community either.
Yeah,
so it should be.
But that's in California, and they'll take California handily.
That's true, but you can use what you did in California as ammunition against her going into the general election.
Sure.
Yeah, but, let me ask you guys a question then. Since you guys both live in California and I left 4 or 5 years ago now, if these lockdowns continue, people can't go to the beach, or people can't go in backyard, you're limited to 10 people, but they can go watch people protest for 1,000. I mean, do you think in those blue, because the blue counties that decided, right, are San Francisco, LA, and Ventura. Right? If you can win those three populations, you're going to win California. So, I mean, what's the likelihood that if some of these people just say, look, man, look, now you're talking about raising my taxes 25% or whatever it is to pay for some of this stuff. Like,
Right.
do you think people just come to November and be like, man, I'm exhausted. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep going this route. Or are they just so ingrained in the California's the greatest state in the world, and we're the beacon of everybody's hope for stuff, and then we're just going to keep going down this path until it just officially crashes?
Well, I know in the business community there's a lot of concern over the possible repeal of a partial repeal of Prop 13.
Yeah,
it's on the ballot in November. It will only strip away the part of Prop 13 that covered commercial businesses and commercial buildings. But I think anyone who has a brain to see, if and when that passes, it's going to be a foot in the door to then fully repeal it moving forward to residential property. And I think that if that does go through, you're going to see an exodus of businesses outside of, just leave the state entirely, because they're no longer going to be able to, one, effectively conduct business inside the state, and two, why would you? Why would you want to conduct business when you're paying thousands of dollars more in property tax than anywhere else in the country? So there's a lot of local issues that I think Californians are concerned with, and I think that if candidates, especially congressional candidates, along the state, I mean, because we saw District 25 with Mike Garcia winning District 25, Katie Hill's former district. He actually has to go up for re-election in November as well, because it was a special election that immediately follows into the general election in 2020. But I think you are right. A lot are getting fed up with the constant having half their paycheck taken away in taxes, having to spend more on a gallon of gas than almost anywhere in the country outside of Hawaii, which has to import almost all of their fuel. When there's ample gas reserves off the coast of California. There's a lot of things that don't make sense here, and I think people are finally starting to wake up in the wake of coronavirus and see this state has serious problems that need addressing, and the current status quo isn't doing it.
Well, we have an exodus already, and I know there's polling that suggests that a good third of the public who's living in urban centers are looking at potentially moving to smaller states, smaller cities, what have you. So people are waking in a number of different ways, and I think we just have to kind of watch those trends. I definitely think there's a lot of Californians that have just been rubber stamp Democrats who are starting to look at these facts and figures and make a choice to if they're going to support Trump and actually maybe even more importantly look down ballot and realize that they can have an effect on some of these things by who they vote for, county board of supervisors or city council, or, state senate, state assembly. AB 5 has been so unpopular here. Freelancers, a lot of independent thinkers, independent workers in our state of California are going, wait, that's when I could be on board with you with a lot of the stuff you're saying. Take like a simple simple transaction between I have this good or service and there's my customer, and you're going to get in the way of that transaction. I think people get big wake ups. And remind us also, Price, when we do, or Derek, when we're looking at, you just said something like, I like to get the pulse, not from polls, but from Twitter. I think we should look to see, because we know there's so many bots on Twitter that I think it would be really interesting to see how much of a hyper progressive facade gets put on by some of those activities. We should definitely do that for another segment.
Well, I mean, because I think go on and see a lot of blue check people, right? That are on the liberal side, Democrat side, who they'll do a poll. If you had to vote right now, who would you vote for?
Right.
And I would say 3 out of 4, Trump's still winning on those. Now, again, I know it can be, hey, retweet this to the Donald Trump crowd, and they go and all emphatically vote. But it is interesting that from groups or individuals who are with the blue check are putting out polls of their own, and they're seeing 52-48, 51-49, 55-42 or something, and then unknown for another. And you're seeing this happen. It's like, and you'll see the comments at the bottom saying, I bet you didn't expect that vote, did you? And so I think that's what's interesting is when you see, they're trying to just gauge an internet, and to Price's point, I mean, those are considered not to be reliable, but you were seeing the exact same thing in 2016. I mean, you were seeing Trump winning poll after poll after poll, online polls, CBS polls even, right? But then the ones they go and do on the phone call.
It was following that 538.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Discrepancy. Well, yeah, who's actually picking up the phone for these polls, and at the end of the day, how many people you can actually reach by doing that method of polling, which has been the fundamental basis for polling since they started polling.
Yeah. Well, let's be respectful of our people's time, and let's see some other content. Before we go, we want to make sure people know we are on Twitter at you can see that here. Facebook, we're streaming to American Close. We also have a YouTube channel, and you can go to americasnewclose.com. We didn't have any chats this time, but you can always live ask us questions on any of those platforms while we are talking, and we'll try to definitely get to your questions by the end of the episode. But I want to, from myself and all these guys, I want to say a big thank you for checking us out, and we're going to try to put out content as quickly as we can, and try to weigh in on a lot of this stuff, and hopefully you'll find it useful and you'll go do your own research and make your own decisions. You guys have anything else to add?
I just encourage people to be part of the conversation. We're more than happy to answer any of the questions that you reach out. If you reach out to us, and I'm really excited for seeing where this program goes moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, and I would say to everybody, just keep asking questions, right? Don't take the media narrative as lock, stock, and barrel. Ask questions, use common sense. I think more people are waking up. The Great Awakening hashtag is always trending on Twitter, it seems now. So I think more people are coming engaged. So anything we can do to help that, I think we all three kind of feel prideful on that, being able to move it along.
Right on. Well, lots of news coming up this week. We'll be checking it out and trying to get out our thoughts and opinions right away. So stick with us. We're done for now. Thank you for enjoying one where we undress the news and expose the naked truth. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.